Carl Gustav Jung was born on July 26, 1875, in Kesswil, a small village in the Swiss canton of Thurgau, near the shores of Lake Constance. He was a Swiss psychiatrist, psychoanalyst, and philosopher who founded analytical psychology, a discipline that would reshape modern psychology and expand its reach into religion, mythology, alchemy, art, and spirituality. Carl Gustav Jung's Red Book, or Liber Novus, the New Book, is among the most enigmatic and profound documents in the history of psychology and spiritual literature. Conceived during a time of personal crisis and transformation, the Red Book represents Jung's descent into the depths of his own unconscious and the extraordinary inner journey that followed. Written and illustrated between 1914 and 1930, it is a record of visionary experiences and psychological encounters, framed not as clinical case studies but as mythic revelations, symbolic dialogues, and artistic expressions of a psyche in turmoil and in search of healing. The book was not published or made available to the public until 2009, decades after Jung's death, and its appearance sent shockwaves through both academic and popular understandings of Jungian thought. To understand the Red Book is to immerse oneself into the private cosmology of Carl Jung, a world populated not by theoretical constructs but by living symbols and mythic archetypes. The text was born out of a period Jung later described as a confrontation with the unconscious, a time when he consciously allowed himself to engage with the visions, dreams, and fantasies that emerged from within. Following his break with Sigmund Freud in 1913, Jung experienced a psychological upheaval that he feared might lead to madness. Instead of fleeing from these inner disturbances, he chose to explore them in full depth, documenting his experiences in a series of black-bound notebooks. These journals, known as the Black Books, served as the raw material for the Red Book, which he transcribed and illuminated by hand in calligraphic script on large folio pages, surrounded by stunning and often unsettling illustrations. The Red Book is not a diary or a manual of clinical psychology. It is more akin to a spiritual autobiography, written in a mythopoetic style that echoes the sacred texts of antiquity. Jung engages in visionary dialogues with figures that seem to arise from a deep collective or archetypal layer of the unconscious. These figures are not merely aspects of his own personality. They are autonomous, numinous presences with their own will, knowledge, and mystery. Among the most prominent is Philemon, a wise old man who comes to serve as Jung's inner guide and teacher, symbolizing the emergence of a deeper wisdom from within. Alongside Philemon are Salome, a blind prophetic figure associated with the erotic and the unconscious feminine, and Elijah, the prophet who initially appears with Salome as part of a symbolic pair. Jung's method of engagement with these inner figures was what he later termed active imagination. Unlike passive dreaming or free association, active imagination involves a conscious dialogue with the contents of the unconscious. Jung would enter a meditative or receptive state, observe the images and scenes that arose, and interact with them as though they were real. These encounters are recorded in vivid, almost surreal narrative form. In one scene, he travels through deserts and cities, encountering gods, monsters, and spirits. In another, he finds himself crucified with a serpent at his side. Each vision unfolds like a sacred drama, laden with symbolic meaning and psychological insight. The result is a text that is neither fiction nor science, but something in between. A personal myth, a new gospel of the self. Throughout the Red Book, Jung confronts the polarities of the psyche: light and darkness, masculine and feminine, reason and madness, divinity and bestiality. He does not attempt to resolve these opposites by choosing one over the other. Instead, he seeks a synthesis, a way of holding the tension of opposites until a third transcendent solution emerges. This process would later become the core of his concept of individuation, the inner journey toward wholeness through the integration of unconscious content. In the Red Book, individuation is not a neat, orderly progression, but a chaotic and often painful confrontation with the unknown. Jung undergoes symbolic deaths and rebirths, sacrifices his ego identity, and learns to listen to the voice of the soul. One of the central motifs of the Red Book is the idea of the soul as a living presence that must be honored and related to. Jung repeatedly describes dialogues with his own soul, personified as a feminine figure who guides, challenges, and sometimes scolds him. These dialogues reveal Jung's belief that psychological health depends on a living relationship with the inner world, not a domination of it, but a respectful and open-hearted engagement. He speaks of descending into the underworld, of entering caves and crossing deserts, of being torn apart and reassembled. These are not just metaphorical journeys, but deeply felt psychic events that reshape his entire sense of identity. The Red Book also reflects Jung's fascination with religious and mythological symbolism. He draws from a wide array of traditions: Christianity, Gnosticism, Greco-Roman mythology, Eastern philosophies, alchemy, and more. These symbols are not used in a scholarly or comparative religion fashion, but as living elements within his own psychic landscape. Christ appears not as a historical figure, but as an archetype of transformation. The serpent, the tree, the egg, and the cross all recur as symbols of death and rebirth, of the cyclical nature of psychological growth. Jung's use of these symbols is deeply experiential. They arise spontaneously from his visions, not as abstract concepts but as expressions of psychic reality. In the Red Book, language itself becomes a tool of transformation. Jung's prose is lyrical, often cryptic, and saturated with symbolic resonance. He writes in a prophetic voice, echoing the tone of biblical scripture or mystical revelations. The text shifts between narrative episodes, philosophical reflections, poetic exhortations, and dramatic dialogues. There is no linear argument or thesis. Instead, the book moves in spirals and loops, reflecting the non-linear nature of inner transformation. This can make the Red Book difficult to read in a conventional sense, but it also gives it a timeless, oracular quality. It is a book to be contemplated rather than consumed, a work of art as much as a psychological document. The illustrations in the Red Book are no less important than the text. Jung was a gifted artist, and he filled the book with intricate mandalas, symbolic figures, and visionary landscapes. These images are not merely decorative, they are visual expressions of the same psychic material explored in the writing. The mandalas in particular reflect Jung's efforts to find order within chaos, to express the wholeness of the self in symbolic form. He discovered that when he drew mandalas during times of inner confusion, they helped him center himself and understand the underlying dynamics of his psyche. This insight would later lead to his extensive work on mandalas in therapy and cross-cultural symbolism. Though the Red Book remained unpublished during Jung's lifetime, its influence permeated his later work. Concepts such as the collective unconscious, archetypes, individuation, synchronicity, and the transcendent function all have their roots in the experiences recorded in the Red Book. Jung himself stated that all his later writings were a kind of elaboration of what he had discovered during that time. Yet he hesitated to publish the Red Book because he feared it would be misunderstood. He described it as the foundation of his work, but also as something too personal and too strange for the academic world of his day. Indeed, the Red Book challenges the boundaries between science and art, psychology and religion, personal experience and universal truth. It is an expression of what Jung called the objective psyche, the idea that the unconscious is not merely a reflection of the personal past but a realm that contains universal patterns and truths. In the Red Book, Jung encounters gods and demons not as hallucinations, but as symbolic realities with psychological significance. He believed that modern people suffered not from neuroses rooted in repressed desires, but from a loss of meaning and connection to the inner world. The Red Book was his response to that crisis of meaning. When the Red Book was finally published in 2009, it was met with astonishment and reverence. Scholars, therapists, artists, and spiritual seekers found in it a treasure trove of insight and inspiration. It revealed a side of Jung that had long been hidden, the visionary, the mystic, the poet. It also provided a deeper understanding of the origins of his psychological theories, grounding them not just in observation and analysis, but in direct, lived experience. The Red Book became a cultural phenomenon, drawing attention from far beyond the field of psychology. Exhibitions of the original manuscript drew thousands of visitors, and the facsimile edition became a bestseller despite its scholarly price and weight. Today, the Red Book is studied not only by Jungian analysts, but by theologians, artists, philosophers, and anyone interested in the deeper dimensions of human existence. It stands as a testament to the power of the inner world and the courage it takes to explore it. Jung's journey into the depths was not an escape from reality, but an attempt to heal and transform it from within. He believed that each person must undertake their own descent, their own confrontation with the shadow and dialogue with the soul. The Red Book is not a map, but a record of one man's path. A path that may inspire others to undertake their own. In the end, the Red Book is an invitation to listen to the voice within, to honor the images that arise from the depths, to embrace the mystery of the self. It is a work of madness and wisdom, despair and hope, fragmentation and integration. It reminds us that the unconscious is not our enemy, but our partner in the journey of becoming whole. Carl Jung's Red Book is more than a book. It is a revelation, a mirror of the soul, and a call to inner adventure that still resonates with those brave enough to turn its pages.